The biggest trade of the trade deadline was no doubt James Harden getting traded from the Los Angeles Clippers to the Cleveland Cavaliers for Darius Garland and a second round pick. And this trade kind of came out of nowhere. There were not really any reports or rumors in the days leading up to this trade about James Harden wanting out of LA or the Clippers wanting to trade James Harden. And then the day that the trade happened, you start seeing reports and rumors and this and that about James Harden possibly going to Cleveland for Darius Garland. And then by like 8:30 p.m., 8 p.m., around that time, James Harden was a Cleveland Cavalier. And it was like, what? How did we get here? But I think the Cleveland Cavaliers won the trade deadline. I think they're the only team who, before the trade deadline, was not a title contender, and now they are a title contender. And I'll explain why. But we got to first talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers and their season. All right, we got to talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers and their season because they come into this season with championship expectations. They come into this season with expectations of winning the Eastern Conference and going to the finals. And they had championship expectations last year. They won 64 games, and then they got bounced in the second round. And this year, they started off really rocky. They were playing better basketball as of late, but it was better, but it wasn't great. The Cavaliers, they're 7th in offensive rating, 13th in defensive rating. They were playing good. But good looks bad when you have championship expectations, because to win a championship, you have to be a great team, and that is just simply not what the Cavaliers have been, all right? They've been injury-prone. They've been underwhelming. They've been disappointing. At times, they've just played like trash as well. And really, when I've watched the Cleveland Cavaliers, a lot of the times I just see Donovan Mitchell putting the team on his back offensively. I see Donovan Mitchell put up 20 points in the fourth quarter to secure a few points of a win. 2 points, 3-point, 4-point win. Donovan Mitchell has to put the team on his back. And that's why I think this trade is fantastic. Because whenever I watch the Cavaliers play, I think, wow, they need another guy who can just get a bucket and another guy who can run the offense. And that guy is James Harden. That guy is not Darius Garland, because Darius Garland has been injury-prone, very injury-prone. And, it's not his fault, but it's just what he's been. Over the last 12 months, he's not played a lot of basketball for the Cleveland Cavaliers. He was hurt in the playoffs. He was hurt a lot of this season. He's only played 26 games. He's got a problem here, and then it heals. And now he's got another problem there. And now he's a Clipper, and he's still hurt. And so I think this trade is great. Because James Harden, not only does James Harden have, provide more on offense than Darius Garland. We'll look at the numbers in a second. But we're going to look at the games played first. Darius Garland, 26 games. James Harden, 46. He's played nearly double the amount of games as Darius Garland. And when you look at the numbers offensively, James Harden's providing more than Darius Garland. 18 points. 2 rebounds, 7 assists for Darius Garland. James Harden, 25 points, 5 rebounds, 8 assists. James Harden is providing more on offense. He's scoring more. He's getting more assists. He is a veteran player. He's a former MVP. And you've just brought that guy into this team with an MVP caliber player in Donovan Mitchell. And obviously James Harden's not playing. This isn't MVP James Harden. It's not 2018 anymore, all right? It's 2026, and James Harden is 36 years old. And they just traded a guy, Darius Garland, 26 years old, for a guy 10 years older. James Harden, he might be out of the league in a few years. We don't know, all right? His basketball play could just fall off a cliff next season, in 2 seasons. We don't know. But the Cavaliers just turned themselves into a title contender, and maybe that window isn't very wide. Maybe that window is Maybe that window closes at the end of next season. Maybe that window closes at the end of this season. But one way or another, the Cleveland Cavaliers just turned themselves into a title contender. They're 7th in offense. And they just traded for a guy who's better offensively than the last point guard they had. And they just traded for a guy who will be way more available than the last point guard they had. They're 7th in offense, and that's with one of their starters never being healthy and not being as good offensively as the guy they just traded for, who's always healthy. So I think that James Harden can help. There's a lot of potential with this Cleveland offense. I think James Harden will help reach that potential that the Cavaliers have with their offense. And, I've said this to a few people that I think James Harden, trading him to Cleveland makes them a title contender. And some people have looked at me and said, well, James Harden's a playoff dropper. And you know what? He does have that reputation. But here's the thing. James Harden, he's not the first option on this team. That's Donovan Mitchell. This is Donovan Mitchell's team. And James Harden doesn't even have to be the second option. It's Evan Mobley. James Harden is not going... It can be Evan Mobley. It can be Evan Mobley. James Harden does not... he's not going to get all this defensive attention, that he's seen in previous seasons. James Harden's not going to be getting doubled. He's not. That's going to be Donovan Mitchell. Might even be Evan Mobley. So I think that changes things for him. He won't be getting the most defensive attention, maybe not even the second most defensive attention. That would probably open things up for him more a little bit. And also, even if he isn't scoring, even if his shots aren't falling in the playoffs, he is still an elite playmaker. He can run an offense. And like I said, the Cavaliers have needed another guy to run the offense. All right, because you have Donovan Mitchell out there being the leading scorer, running the offense. He's going to get burnt out. He might even get injured himself doing all that. So now you got another guy in James Harden that will be available, unlike Darius Garland, to run the offense, to at the very least run the offense. And he's still a 25-point scorer, 25 points per game scorer. He can do that in the playoffs. All right, he has this reputation as a playoff dropper. James Harden can still have fantastic playoff games. So I think this trade was a massive upgrade for the Cavaliers offensively. And they also made a trade. They traded DeAndre Hunter to the Sacramento Kings for Dennis Schroeder and Keon Ellis. And I think that makes them better defensively. It gives them more depth. And Dennis Schroeder, he's a solid offensive player. He can come off the bench in the playoffs, and he can drop 15 points. He can drop 18 points. That's what Dennis Schroeder can provide you on just, he can do that. And he's not going to do it every night, but he can certainly do it. And Keon Ellis is a solid defensive player. Dennis Schroeder, also solid defensive player. I expect the Cavaliers' offensive rating to go up. I expect their defensive rating to maybe even go up a little bit. And, Harden, I think he's played 2 games for the Cavaliers now. They got a 2-point victory over the Kings in his debut for the Cavaliers, and then they got a 2-point victory over the Nuggets last night. And, I saw some people say, we traded for James Harden, we barely beat the Kings. James Harden, the Cavaliers just went and traded away 3 players. They got 3 new players, because they also traded Lonzo Ball. They just traded away 3 players. They got 3 new players. It's going to take a few games for them to really get into a rhythm. I think after All-Star break, we're going to see how the Cavaliers play, and we're going to be able to really come to a better understanding of, hey, is this team going to be something in the playoffs, or are they going to be a first-round exit? Are they going to be a second-round exit? Can they make the conference finals? Can they make the finals? And I'm not saying the Cavaliers are going to win it all. But I do think that because of this James Harden trade, along with the Dennis Schroeder and Keon Ellis trade, I think that this team has a real good chance of making it out of the East and making it to the finals. All right? I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but I am saying the Cleveland Cavaliers certainly have the ability and the firepower offensively and the ability on defense, they're not a bad defensive team, to make it to the NBA Finals.